Angel of death is a common figure in various religions and very popular in people's imagination. Generally, the concept of the angel of death indicates a spiritual being who is responsible for reaping people's lives when his time on earth comes to an end, or at least responsible for watching people at the time of their deaths, accompanying their souls in the transition to the world of the dead. But many people also believe that this kind of death angel concept is based on biblical passages. Even one of the most remembered passages in this regard is the one that records the 10 pests of Egypt, when in the 10th pest, the destroyer went through the Egyptian lands, and all the firstborn of that people were killed. But what does the Bible really say about this subject? Is there really an angel of death according to the biblical text? Well, if you want to understand all this, watch this video until the end. We can start by saying that, in fact, there are some passages biblical who report that angels of the Lord have been involved in the deaths of many people. In King David's time, for example, the Bible says that God sent a plague as judgment about Israel who killed 70,000 men. And in that context, there was a destructive angel from the part of the Lord who was about to lift his hand to bring a great catastrophe over Jerusalem, but which was prevented by the order of the Lord, as we read in the second book of Samuel, chapter 24, verses 15 and 16. Centuries later, in the time of King Ezekiel in Judah, Sennacherib, who was king of Syria, announced that he would destroy Jerusalem and that the God of Israel could do nothing. Then the Bible records that at night the Lord's angel passed through the Assyrian camp and killed nothing less than 185,000 men from the Assyrian army of Sennacherib. This is recorded in the second book of Kings, chapter 19, verse 35, where the biblical text says, "Therefore, that the same night came out the angel of Lord and injured in the Ariel of Assyrians to 185,000 of them. And getting up early in the morning, behold, they were all dead bodies." But long before these events, the Bible also talks about how all the firstborn of Egypt died with God's judgment in the 10th plague. But this biblical passage is much discussed among scholars. Some argue that at that time it was God himself who executed the judgment. This is because the biblical text of Exodus does not clearly say that an angel was responsible for this task. The text says that God would pass to hurt the Egyptians, but would not let the destroyer enter the homes of the Israelites who had in the umbra of their doors the blood of the sacrificed lambs for the first Easter. And those who think so understand that the expression "the destroyer" in this text can be just a personified way of speaking of God's judgment. Others believe that the destroyer quoted in the text of the book of Exodus makes reference to an angel sent by God to Egypt to execute his judgment. So, in this specific context, and in the New Testament, inciting this event, the writer of Hebrews, in chapter 11 and verse 28 of his epistle, talks about the exterminator of firstborn. And so, many Christians often say that the angel of death passed through Egypt in the 10th plague. But in the light of these biblical passages, it is clear that, although in some texts biblical writers actually attribute to the angels of the Lord the task of bringing death upon the earth by serving as agents of God's judgment, the Bible says that there is an angel of specific death. In other words, there is no biblical basis for identifying a special angel that would supposedly be responsible for reaping people's lives or taking care of the transition from their souls from the present state of life to life in the beyond. However, based on parable of the rich and Lazarus, which many interpreters believe it was Jesus' account of a real story, it is possible to understand that the angels of the Lord assist believers at the time of their deaths, leading them to paradise. But the biblical text does not deepen this question. That is, it provides no further details about this likely function of the Lord's angels at the time of the death of a believer. But here someone may ask, why do many Christians think the angel of death exists? Well, some Christians think so because they wrong interpret the biblical passages that speak of angels of the Lord who brought death to men as God's judgment. Others simply reproduce a type of popular thinking that is strongly influenced by old legends and traditions. In fact, for a long time, people have associated death with some supernatural being. In Greek and Roman mythologies, for example, there was a figure of a deity that was the personification of death and that took people's lives. Even in Jewish and Islamic traditions, there is the figure of an angel of death. However, As much as the existence of an angel of specific death is extremely widespread among people and is present in many religious legends and traditions, it is strange to the biblical truth. The Bible simply presents angels as divine messengers. That is, the angels are agents of God. And when any of these extraordinary angels brings death to, it does not mean that he has authority in himself to do that kind of thing, but that he is simply fulfilling God's will. Only God has the authority to decide on the life and death of someone. Moreover, it is worth remembering that in the Bible, death is God's judgment because of universal sin. Then, if on the one hand the Bible does not speak of the existence of an angel of specific death, on the other hand, it shows that, on occasion, an angel of the Lord may be the responsible for causing death on the earth. This has happened a few times in biblical times, and according to various biblical passages, will happen intensely again at the end of time. The book of Revelation, for example, reveals in a very clear way the participation of angels in God's judgment in the final moments of world history.
You stayed until the end, and you know what that means? It means we're connected. So, comment your city, your country, check out the links in the description, and share this with someone who also understands the value of truly listening. Thank you, a big hug to all, and see you in the next video.